inform the parents that you don't have any right on your child if they're in bad condition. The hospital has the right of life or death on your child. Parents don't know this. I've spent a lot of money, but how much is my son's life worth? I spent so far in hospital fees $200,000 US, and the airplane to bring him $32,000 US plus all the other expenses, and it's not over.
Today, we speak with Nicolas Tétreault, father of 6, whose son, Archer, nearly drowned on October 8 due to a brief moment of inattention. To save his 2-year-and-a-half son, Nicolas arranged an air ambulance transfer to New Orleans for hyperbaric oxygen treatment, a therapy not recognized in Canada for such cases. He faced an agonizing choice: Archer death or a costly trip to the US to save his child. Dr. Paul G. Arch, who is currently treating Archer in the US, is a clinical professor and director of hyperbaric medicine in LSU Health New Orleans. Known for his groundbreaking work in restoring brain function with hyperbaric treatment, Dr. Hart was featured on CNN in 2017 for treating a 23-month-old toddler who had suffered brain damage after falling into a swimming pool. Under his care, the child regained full cognitive abilities and nearly all motor functions thanks to hyperbaric therapy. Dr. Hart explains that hyperbaric therapy stimulates tissue growth, inhibits inflammation, and stops cell death. I spoke to him. Listen.
I have treated well over 4,000 patients with neurological injuries, almost all of them in the chronic phase, meaning a year or more. In that group is about half of them are children, half adults. In the children, I've treated over 150, close to 160 now, drowned children. And we have some results that nobody has ever seen for children who have had cardiac arrest from a drowning. So dead, heart stopped, resuscitated, finally made it out of the hospital. And then we have some that are walking and talking. We have 10% of them that I've treated where we've seen no result. And then we've got a range of results in between. But the vast majority, 90% of them, the parents will tell you, and we've documented this, improvement once we started the hyperbaric treatment. And it's now the subject of a retrospective study that we have made an initial application to the university to go back and get the results of all of these children and try to compare them to children who have drowned, made it out of the hospital, and have not had hyperbaric treatment.
In Canada, Dr. Pierre Marois of St. Justin Hospital has extensively studied hyperbaric therapy. A study he co-authored, published in March 2024, found that the treatment significantly improved motor function in children with cerebral palsy, 28.6 times more than the standard therapies and 3 times more than intensive physiotherapy. Despite such compelling evidence, Health Canada insists there is no proof of its effectiveness for cerebral palsy or drowning-related injuries and warns against its use for these conditions on the government website. Hyperbaric treatment for unapproved conditions is not covered by public health insurance. Facilities like the Montreal Children's Hospital adhere to standard protocols. In an email response, the hospital clarified hyperbaric oxygen therapy is not part of global standards of care for the chronic treatment of brain injuries caused by oxygen deprivation after resuscitated cardiac arrest. They added that when there is no hope for brain function recovery, care focuses on comfort and pain management, effectively supporting the end-of-life process rather than exploring experimental treatments, even those with documented success. This situation underscores a troubling double standard. While unapproved treatments like the COVID-19 vaccine were fast-tracked due to profit potentials, life-saving options like hyperbaric therapy remain inaccessible to many. Hyperbaric therapy is just one of many treatments blocked by regulatory bodies, such as Health Canada. But the main question is why? Nicolas Tétreault shared his difficult and emotional journey with us.
Yeah, so basically, long story short, October 8th, our son of 2 years and a half, Arthur Tétreault, drowned in the pool at our house. It was a cold day, and he was deprived of a real strong oxygen feed and stable heartbeat for about 72 minutes. After 5 to 10 minutes, we started giving him CPR and mouth-to-mouth, but he got only a stable pulse about 71 minutes afterwards. So then he's been transferred from one hospital, the Lakeshore Hospital, to the Montreal Children, and he stayed there for about 7 weeks. And where they decided and concluded unilaterally that our baby, long story short, will be a vegetable for the rest of his life, that he had some damages to the brain via an MRI. They tried to extubate him, which worked for 12, 14 hours, but his diaphragm on the left side was not working well, the muscle, but the baby was extremely overdrugged, and we had brought some undercover doctors to look at the file, and we knew that he was severely overly drugged, so that we also knew with other doctors that it was impossible to assess any cognitive or mental state of the child being under such difficult and strong drugs. So after 5 weeks, they told us unilaterally, my wife and I call them the death squad, the two idiotic doctor with no emotions, that basically our son had no chance of survival, and that the hospital, in all its glory, had decided unilaterally to unplug our son and to prepare the funerals, while promoting extremely strongly the harvesting of the organs and the donation of the organs of little Arthur. But in the parallel, we were talking to American hospitals and ultra-specialized teams of drowning doctors who told us that they had access to all our medical file, plus the MRI, we had shipped it in urgent airmail. And they said that he was in the 20% less damaged kids they've seen from a drowning, not the 80% or 100% most damaged, but 20% less damaged. So he was in a good spot, and they had cured patients with much more complicated medical files than him. That gave us a lot of hope.
What was the main reason why the Montreal hospital did refuse to try at least the advice from the other hospital?
And that's a very good question. So basically, the doctor in charge is a medical professor at the Louisiana State University, Dr. Paul G. Harsh, and he has treated 160 children from drowning. And he was trying to reach them. We're giving them the data, and they refused to look at it, saying that basically, it comes from the U.S. We cannot teach Canadian doctors anything. They knew everything. Very arrogant and a non-scientific approach. The doctor in the U.S. is specialized in drownings. That's what he does every day. So why can't you listen to an eminent, worldwide renowned professor? They refused everything, and simple things that could have made a huge difference, a huge impact on our son's physical conditions. They said no to it. They could have done it. Their cost would have been $15 or $20, $10 at the most, maybe, of oxygen. They refused to do everything. Furthermore, another doctor, prominent doctor from Saint Justine Pediatric Hospital in Montreal, Dr. Pierre Marois, 35 years pediatrician there, also gave them the same advice, because he did many studies with the American team. He's our world leader and from Canada, and they refused everything he said as well. There's essentially, I think, the head of the pediatric department over there is corrupt in the sense of scientifically corrupt, where you lose your scientific approach when you start closing your eyes and closing your ears and not listening to any additional sources of medical advice. And that's what we felt, that the dice were rigged. And 85% of what they did was very good at the Montreal Children, but that 15% is a life changer. It's a life changer. And they refused everything that was offered to them in a super respectful way as medical colleagues. But if you're not a specialist in drownings, you cannot improvise and acquire 38 years of experience like this. Why refuse help?
So you explained to me that you had like a meeting and they announced you the final decision.
First, it was the worst meeting ever because the dice are rigged. Let's say you're a parent and they announce your dad's going to die. They bring you in a meeting and they basically tell you all the reasons why they believe your child should die and should be unplugged. And the parents, whatever you say, it's like there's no real exchange. It's all it's like a fake democracy, and you're basically, it's like a totalitarian regime, a dictatorship, and they tell you basically that they judge that your child's gonna die.
I did call Dr. Arch, and I asked him his opinion about the condition of Arthur and the attempt of collaboration with the Montreal Hospital.
I had made the recommendation to the parents after extensive discussions that it would be impossible likely to get hyperbaric oxygen for Arthur in Montreal or even in Canada, and we would need to wait till he got out of the hospital. So I told him the only thing that can be done is what I've done now in well over 100 children in ICUs all over the United States and around the world, is to give the normal baric oxygen. And I said, I'm happy to talk with the doctors there and explain this because it's science they're not aware of. It's not taught, but it is published. And I have a list of references that I sent to the Tétreaults, like I do all family members, and tell them to give them to the doctors, then we can have a discussion. I never heard from the doctors, and the Tétreaults told me that the doctors refused to do it and that apparently they had no desire to speak with me about it. So it never happened until he got on the evacuation flight, bringing him from Montreal Children's to New Orleans. He was given the supplemental oxygen in flight, and his dystonia calmed down, and according to the parents, he was more awake and alert. So that was the first time we were able to give it to him. We then continued it in the hospital here, and then yesterday he had his first hyperbaric treatment, and he is now more awake. He's starting to move. Today, he just left 15 minutes ago, and he was beginning to follow my commands. He tried to squeeze my hand to command. He looked in my direction and gazed, and he, in the chamber, was moving his hands and feet. So we're already seeing an early response to this.
And how was the child when he arrived? Because Nicolas mentioned that he was over-medicamented.
Yes. He was very sedated and essentially unresponsive, sleeping almost all the time. I mean, you could arouse him, but he was not very aware and awake. And we had, one of the first things we tried to do in defense of the doctors and the treatment done at Montreal Children's, he had severe dystonia and neurostorming, which is common after this type of injury. And aside from trying to do hyperbaric oxygen, for which there's some published evidence of this in adults with traumatic brain injury and storming, there's nothing that can be done except heavy sedative medications. And that's what was giving to him because his storming was so bad, his muscles, he was tensing them to the point where he was breaking down his muscles. And it's called rhabdomyolysis. So they had to heavily sedate him. But once the storming was over, the heavy sedation was continued. And things then changed the interaction with the parents. And there was no further progress in terms of, proceeding to a tracheostomy, et cetera. So what happened when he finally came here, he was heavily sedated, and our medical team in the hospital tried weaning him, and he started having withdrawal symptoms. So he had to be weaned slower. Today, we also turned down his dose of Valium somewhat from what he had been getting, and we're trying to slowly wean him from that because he is on a gargantuan dose of Valium. He was on 40 milligrams a day. The adult dose is 5 milligrams twice a day.
Is that the possibility why the Children's Hospital in Montreal didn't achieve anything with him regarding a progress in getting better?
Potentially. It could contribute to it. But if you read the hospital notes, they had a palliative care consult done, and this was in preparation for doing the tracheostomy that he needed. He had the ability to breathe on his own, but due to a lot of secretions and due to possible injury to his airway and some other problems, they had him off the ventilator one day and he failed. They had to put him back on the ventilator. So the next step is to perform a tracheostomy, make a hole in the front of the neck into the airway and put the tube in there instead of having it go in his mouth down into his lungs. And the palliative care patients service was consulted because the next step after that is that, then you have to wean the drugs so that he can progress. Well, the palliative care people said that to prepare him with a tracheostomy and eventually the possibility if he needed to go home on a ventilator, you have to be able to achieve the capacity for experiencing joy. And they said that they did not believe that hyperbaric oxygen therapy could generate the capacity for Arthur to achieve joy such that they should not proceed with a tracheostomy, even long-term ventilator care. And at that point, the decision to do a tracheostomy apparently was scuttled. And the parents were then told that, there's nothing more that could be done for him.
So it's why they decided to give a deadline when they will unplug and proceed to comfort treatment.
Yes. Why they gave a deadline is unknown. I mean, I can't speak to that. He's breathing on his own. He's off the ventilator. He's coughing. He manages his own secretions. He's now looking at me to command. He's moving his hands. And for the first time today, I've seen his feet moving. And this happened in the chamber. So
why do you think, and especially in Canada, but why do you think the hyperbaric treatment is so controversial?
That is the subject of a book I have written about this. The medical profession has never understood the science of this until 2010, when some experiments were done that finally elucidated what is going on with hyperbaric oxygen. Prior to that, the doctors have struggled with a scientific definition that explained what this was. And when doctors don't understand a therapy, they do not refer for it. And in the absence of understanding it, when people stand up and make claims like this, we improved a child who drowned, the doctors claim it's non-science. Nobody can explain it. I can explain it. Science can explain it, but it could not be explained in light of the more primitive understanding that there's been of this therapy for 347 years up to roughly 2010, 348 years up to 2010. So, this has not been understood. Doctors don't refer for what they don't understand, and claims about successful treatment with it because it could not be adequately explained and defended. The therapy was then looked at as a fraud, and yet the science behind it is substantial.
These people wanted to unplug our son. Today, 30 days after leaving Montreal, where he was way overdrugged, they said to us he was good for garbage. They would harvest the organs and kill him. And they would unplug him as of November 29th. That's Quebec healthcare system for you. More to come. Today, 30 days after, you see, no ventilator. This is just for humidity. No ventilator. He breathes on his own, right? Today we're leaving the pediatric intensive care unit. Look at his stats.
As you experience, now you probably spend like a lot of money over there.
Yes, I've spent a lot of money, but how much is my son's life worth? I spent so far in hospital fees $200,000 US, and the airplane to bring him $32,000 US plus all the other expenses, and it's not over. Thank God I had some money saved aside. Imagine the poor people that have to go meet a doctor, the death squad, like I had at the Montreal Children or any other hospital, and they tell you, well, we've decided on our own, unilaterally, and whatever you say, to unplug your child or your son or your parent or your mom. I mean, it's so unfair. So I feel for these people. I did not want to go public with my story. The only reason I did it's because of that, to prevent extreme promotion of organ harvesting that becoming like a sect in some hospitals, to also inform the parents that you don't have any right on your child if they're in bad condition. The hospital has the right of life or death on your child. Parents don't know this. I studied 6 years at university. I ran 4 elections. I was advisor to a prime minister in Quebec, a premier. I've never heard about the hospital having the right of life or death on your children. So people need to be informed, and we have to change these laws. It makes no sense whatsoever. And if we can help my wife and I, that's our goal now. We really want to try to awaken the population and try to raise funds to save hundreds of children, or thousands if we can.
At Rebel News, we believe that government should prioritize the best quality of treatment, the best healthcare, instead of seeing people turning themselves into drug abuse or overuse of medication to be able to feel no pain anymore. So go over helpnoharms.ca, sign the petition, put pressure on our government to make sure we are stopping what we are seeing in the society, where we see an overuse of drugs and medication.